Evening, everybody. Uh, this talk is recorded for Wednesday Night Live on the 25th of November 2020. I'm recording because during the day, our internet has been rather annoyingly unreliable, and I'm slightly afraid of getting cut off from the Zoom call this evening. So I thought I would do a recording, and then we've got some material for you to think about, even if I can't in the end join you or only by telephone. Our theme this week, continuing our journey through the Beatitudes, the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5. This evening, it's "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." And I've got some images to show you. So we'll begin with this first slide. Let's just begin with a short prayer. Lord, as we think about your word to us, give us open hearts and open ears. Amen. So, the natural way that all these talks actually about the Beatitudes break down is to think about the first bit and then think about the second bit with the because as the hinge between the two. So I'll do that. What is peace is the first question I'll think about. What might peacemakers look like? And then, for we will be called children of God. Let's just think about that, what that means. And then the third part of this talk, I'm thinking about where the front lines of peacemaking might be. And I've chosen that phrase deliberately. There is a bit of a sense that working for peace is passive, unlike waging war. But actually, we need to use the right language. Peacemaking is just as much an active engagement as entering into conflict. Peace first. The Hebrew biblical word for God's peace is SHALOM. And to kick us off on that, I'm going to show you a rather excellent, I think, little film from the Bible Project, just exploring the meanings of that single word.
The word peace is common in most languages. People can talk about peace treaties or times of peace. It means the absence of war. And in the Bible, the word peace can refer to the absence of conflict, but it also points to the presence of something better in its place. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word for peace is shalom. And in the New Testament, the Greek word is eirene. The most basic meaning of shalom is complete or whole. The word can refer to a stone that has a perfect, whole shape with no cracks. It can also refer to a completed stone wall that has no gaps and no missing bricks. Shalom refers to something that's complex with lots of pieces that's in a state of completeness, wholeness. It's like Job, who says his tents are in a state of shalom because he counted his flock and no animals are missing. This is why shalom can refer to a person's well-being. Like when David visited his brothers on the battlefield, he asked about their shalom. The core idea is that life is complex, full of moving parts and relationships and situations, and when any of these is out of alignment or missing, your shalom breaks down. Life is no longer whole, it needs to be restored. In fact, that's the basic meaning of shalom when you use it as a verb. To bring shalom literally means to make complete or restore. So Solomon brings shalom to the unfinished temple when he completes it. Or if your animal accidentally damages your neighbor's field, you shalom them by giving them a complete repayment for their loss. You take what's missing and you restore it to wholeness. The same goes for human relationships. In the book of Proverbs, to reconcile and heal a broken relationship is to bring shalom. And when rival kingdoms make shalom in the Bible, it doesn't just mean they stop fighting, it also means they start working together for each other's benefit. This state of shalom is what Israel's kings were supposed to cultivate, and it rarely happened. So the prophet Isaiah, he looked forward to a future king, a prince of shalom. And his reign would bring shalom with no end, a time when God would make a covenant of shalom with his people and make right all wrongs and heal all that's been broken. This is why Jesus' birth in the New Testament was announced as the arrival of eirene. Remember, that's the Greek word for peace. Jesus came to offer his peace to others, like when he said to his followers, "My peace I I give to you all. The apostles claimed that Jesus made peace between messed up humans and God when he died and rose from the dead. The idea is that he restored to wholeness the broken relationship between humans and their creator. This is why the apostle Paul can say Jesus himself is our eirene. He was the whole complete human that I am made to be but have failed to be. And now he gives me his life as a gift. And this means that Jesus' followers are now called to create peace. Paul instructed local churches to keep their unity through the bond of peace, which requires humility and patience and bearing with others in love. Becoming people of peace means participating in the life of Jesus, who reconciled all things in heaven and earth, restoring peace through his death and resurrection. So peace takes a lot of work, because it's not just the absence of conflict. True peace requires taking what's broken and restoring it to wholeness, whether it's in our lives, our relationships, or in our world. And that's the rich biblical concept of peace. Hey, thanks for watching this word study video by the Bible Project. We make lots of
It's very rich, that film. I've put the URL up. You can watch it yourselves. The concept of wholeness then opens out into a certain set of qualities that go with peace. So there's mutual love and goodwill. Divine love is a function of the will. It's wanting to see the best for the other. There's lots of kinds of love, but that's the nature of God's love. It's goodwill, wanting the best for the other. But there's also an aspect of things being properly ordered. The city that's at Shalom, it's complex, but internally things are ordered as they ought to be. Now, orderliness in itself is not a sign of peace. A dictator can create an absence of disorder by crushing the will of people to think for themselves. But just order, godly order, has everybody flourishing, each in their own place, each doing their own thing, but the whole hangs together as a means to our flourishing. So those are qualities we might think about and look for as we think about peacemaking in different aspects of life. And in order to get to shalom, to peace, as the video suggested, there's a need for a whole series of reconciliations. Things which are divided need to be brought back into wholeness. Reconciliation between God and creation first has to come first, because God is the source of all good, the source of all our ability to make peace. And it is by being in relationship with God that we can move forward on any other kinds of reconciliation. As the video says, that is achieved through the atonement work of Christ. Atonement means making at one. That is literally where the word comes from. It was coined in the early 15th century, I think. Jesus, through his death and resurrection, took what was formerly split apart, God and human beings, or the whole of creation indeed, and made them at one. And as a result of that, the divisions within humanity can be healed. St. Paul writes about how there is neither Jew nor Greek, nor male nor female, nor free nor slave in the kingdom of God. And as we look around the world, those divisions still apply and still need to be healed. But there are also many other divisions that we can think about around topics of sexuality, for example, on which the Church of England is very strongly divided at this time. The divisions between the poor and the rich, not just within one community, but around the world. There are many splits And we'll talk about that in a few moments. And then reconciliation between individuals. So shalom is a state that has those qualities: mutual love and the goodwill, wanting the good of the other, and just order. But it's also a process. Peacemaking is a matter of reconciliation. We come on to this idea of the children of God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. It puzzled me a bit when I started to think about it. First of all, because children of God is the general title of Christians. So what's the relationship between being a peacemaker and being a Christian? And then being a child of God, being a child of anyone, is a state of being. So what's the relationship between the activity, the doing word, peacemaking, and the being word, which is what being a children of God is? Well, what does this mean then, being children of God? At the risk of stating the obvious, it's not that we are biologically children of God. I know who my biological father is, and we each of us have one, and we all kind of know how that works. The virgin birth is perhaps the only instance of somebody who is biologically a child of God. And I think some people who have difficulty with the doctrine of the virgin birth, they do have difficulty precisely because 2,000 years ago, people didn't really understand the biology. And the idea was that the Holy Spirit came and shaped the baby in the womb, because the understanding back then was that it was the father who provided all of the material that created the identity of the child. And the mother merely provided a vessel within which the child could grow. Which is not what we understand by that now. Anyway, that's by the by. So saying we are children of God is a metaphor. It's an image. But it's a powerful one, because the idea of belonging to a family is powerful. Still, today, it matters to most of us enormously that we belong to a family. Those people who don't feel that they have a family suffer from that. People who perhaps have been adopted and aren't sure who their parents actually are can find that hard to live with sometimes. In biblical times, the idea of belonging to a family was even more important, because in that society, it was a profound affiliation which affected every aspect of who you were, how you understood your own identity, but also practically your livelihood. You were likely to go into work which came out of your family background. Joseph was a carpenter, so Jesus was a carpenter. In the dangerous world where law enforcement was pretty shaky, belonging to a family meant that was something that, in a very literal sense, kept you safe. And who you might get to marry was strongly affected by family. So this concept of being a child of God in the biblical times, that would mean that every aspect of your life and identity was affected by that belonging to God's family. That's true for us too. And it also means, if we are God's children, that means that we bear God's family resemblance. And I think that's true at two levels. There is one sense in which all human beings bear the resemblance of God, because we are created in God's image. That's the phrase used in Genesis, and it doesn't mean that we are in God's image in that he has two eyes and a nose in the middle of his face. It means that God is a reasoning, moral being. God is love. It is God's character to want the best, and God has the capacity to know and to hold in his mind. And we, through our reason, have those capacities as well. But we're also, the Bible tells us, God's family, because we also bear God's family resemblance, because Christ lives in us, and we live out the life of God as we walk about the world. And we become God's family in the same way as we have that resemblance at two levels. So we become God's family through a two-step process. First, by being created in God's image. In that sense, all humans are God's children. But then we are adopted into God's family in a special way because of atonement through Jesus' death and resurrection. And that's what it means to be a Christian, to belong to a family. There's no such thing as an individual Christian, and obviously we're all individuals in one sense, but a way of describing being a Christian which isn't a way of describing participating in a family has missed the point. It's not about what you in your little head think, it's about what family you belong to. So I've talked about what God's peace is and what it looks like when you see it, what the processes are that bring it about. And I've talked about the effect of that we become children of God. We resemble God in the way we're living our life. I wanted to talk about what the front lines of peacemaking might be in my or your life. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they will be called children of God. The resemblance that I have to God, the family resemblance, is brought out more and more when I am creating God's shalom, when I am establishing reconciliation, rolling out the just order and relationships of goodwill and mutual love, which belong to God's shalom. Everyone has opportunities to make peace because everyone is surrounded by non-reconciled relationships, because we live in a sinful world. So let's think about where they might be. I've begun at the most individual level. I am, as those of you who know me will know by now, that I'm quite concerned when we overemphasize individualism and just reduce Christianity to something that's about the personal field. But I started here because there is no doubt in my mind that the greatest challenges to our moral character and to our ability to be reconciled and make peace happen at the level of family and friends. Most of us have people in our family who can wind us up. Many families have deep, long-standing divisions. Some families have people who don't speak to one another. Some families have been broken apart by relationship breakdown. And some people carry lifelong scars from the fact that they've been raised by adults who weren't able to get together and stay together and get on. So within our own families is perhaps the first front line of reconciliation. And that's true on a number of levels. For those of us prone to bickering, some married couples do it, some children do it. I do it with my brothers. We're all about 50, so we should know better by now. Just trying day by day, moment by moment almost, to always say the kind thing, not make the little joke or the little jibe. But sometimes it's at that level. Sometimes it's deeper and harder when you're talking about someone who has really done you harm. Reconciliation is very, very hard sometimes. And I think it's important to stress when we're talking about forgiveness within families that forgiveness and justice are two sides of the same coin. Somebody who has been really harmed by someone in their family, perhaps through abuse, needs to know that there is justice. on, sorry about that. The phone just rang and I've broken off and lost my thread now. Anyway, family and friends is one level at which we can make peace. Each of us, though, also lives in a society which is full of conflict and divisions between people. I'm not really talking about politics or campaigning when I say each of us has a task of peacemaking to carry out. So much as that as we live within the ordinary structures of life, going into an office and doing a job to run a business, or going into the supermarket to get our daily shop, or just popping out of your front door and seeing your neighbours. In all these ordinary daily activities, there are opportunities to spread and build those characteristics that I talked about as being the characteristics of shalom, mutual love and goodwill, an orderliness in which everyone flourishes. So it's not just that everybody stays in their box, but we have a richness within that order of relationship and friendship. And people are getting what they need. And reconciliation. Sometimes when we want to build peace within these ordinary structures of life, we quite quickly are going to bang up against the limitations that are built into our culture. In this country, in England, we are very private people. We hide behind our front doors and we hide behind a smile. And it's quite possible to live on a street like the one in this bottom picture for decades and barely know one another, barely ever have crossed one another's front door. Because that's the context in which we live, to show Christian love, we might need to do things that other people feel a bit odd, maybe even slightly uncomfortable. We maybe need to turn up the volume of our goodwill a few notches higher than feels comfortable or natural. We invite people in, to go across the road to talk to people, to make a point when you pass someone of not just saying, "How are you?" but actually stopping and trying to start a conversation. If you do, other people will as well. It's catching, but it's not always comfortable. The third frontier of peacemaking is in the areas where we get into what we call politics, which is to say the attempts to address the genuine areas of non-peace, non-shalom in our society, historic injustices which produce current injustices, whether it's the racism, not necessarily shown by individuals, but that's built into the system so that systematically people from ethnic minorities get less good outcomes from society. Might be about the sexism, which in a similar way is built in so that the opportunities for women to pursue certain careers, for young girls to think that they could pursue certain careers, are limited by a lack of role models, lack of opportunity. On the right-hand side, we have climate change. Climate change is sometimes discussed in terms of the fact that we need to deal with this, otherwise it's going to be really bad for us in the future. But I think if we are a people of peacemakers, then we need to deal with it now, not because it'll be bad for us in the future, but because it's already bad for some of the poorest and most vulnerable people now. People who live in low-lying lands, people whose ability to make a living from the land is already now being diminished by climate change. This is another frontier of peacemaking. And in some ways, this is an area where the concept of just order is maybe the first one that we reach for. The world is disordered where it doesn't demonstrate a shalom, which enables everyone to thrive and flourish. We don't have the wholeness that God wishes for his creation. But as we go about it, it's very important that we maintain the other characteristics of shalom, that we proceed in this through mutual love and goodwill, that we are genuinely seeking to achieve the best outcomes for one another and for the common good. And that as we seek progress, we are not creating divisions, but striving for reconciliation. But of course, that reconciliation cannot be based on accepting that the person who enjoys a better position because of injustice simply declines to engage with the issue. And so we're going to accept that position and merely tolerate injustice. It needs to be an active peacemaking, which challenges, which refuses to take no for an answer to the fact that this issue needs to be addressed. But as we address it, we're seeking to address it together. It's with an invitation to everybody to get round the table and figure out a better way to be in the future. This talk has been based on a pretty wide understanding of what peace is. But I don't want to finish without addressing a narrow understanding of peace, which is an absence of war. Because this, for some of us, may well be a horizon of peacemaking that we need to engage with. We live in a world which is full of armed conflict. And we live in a country which has two characteristics. Firstly, we have historically been good at armed conflict, and we've used that to raid the resources of people all around the world. And secondly, that we manufacture an enormous quantity of weapons, and we sell them around the world, and they fuel conflict. These are not things to be proud of about being British. And because I think they're true, they create particular moral obligation on us, I think, to engage with these issues. I've talked about tackling the arms trade. For most of us, that's not a task where we have any direct power to prevent the manufacture or export of weapons. But what we do have the power to do is to resist the legitimation of the arms trade. Often peace campaigners are active in things like encouraging charities or Oxbridge colleges or institutions like that, and churches amongst them, not to accept donations from companies like BAE, for instance, a massive arms manufacturer, or from the rest of the arms trade. And there are many people who make their living from manufacturing weapons. And whilst one needs to avoid being uncharitable, I think it's important to maintain the view and act on the basis that that's not an okay way to make your living. Just as other people who are caught up in the drugs trade or the sex trade, or there are a number of other trades which are not okay. People who are caught up in them need our love and our support, but we also need to maintain that those are not okay trades. And selling weapons into unstable parts of the world is not an okay trade. The second thing I've mentioned there is resisting the rush to war. Because this country has historically been good at fighting wars, we are more ready than most to regard that as a good way to solve international problems. It rarely is a good way, in fact. I've used the logo of the Stop the War Coalition, which came together over the Second Iraq War. which was clearly a disaster. It shattered Iraq, and Iraq being shattered not only caused a hellish decade for the people of Iraq, but it's destabilized the nations around, which has led to war in Syria, and the whole Middle East is a much more fragile place than it was 20 years ago. That was a disaster as a war. Very few wars achieve what they set out to achieve. All this is perhaps a bit negative. So the third thing I've stressed is building international friendship. I think it's heartening when you drive into a place and there's a sign up saying that they are twinned with somewhere else. In a very simple level, the more people we know around the world, the more engaged we are with other cultures and understand what the world looks like through other people's eyes, the more we are peace building, and will become less likely to get dragged into a rhetoric of war, conflict. What I wanted to say. I've suggested some questions you might like to address in breakout groups. What parts of your character equip you to be a peacemaker? And the second question is trying to ask the opposite. What changes in your mind or your habits might make you a better peacemaker? And then just inviting you to look around you. Where is non-shalom around you? Where does peacemaking and reconciliation really apply? And then the fourth question. We all have different callings in these areas. Is there an aspect of peacemaking that particularly calls out to you? As I said at the beginning, if you are watching this video, it's because I've got stuck and I'm not with you. So I send you my love and prayers and hope that the discussion goes well. Bye-bye.